Thank you very much for the introduction, and thank you for inviting me. And I would like to acknowledge the Packaging Material Task Force, since they are behind my presence here. It's a pleasure to be here and be exposed to the science and the discussions. I would like to start by saying that for this specific topic, I have no particular affiliations to disclose. So moving forward, the topic today is sustainability and recycling in packaging. And the first thing I would like to do is to ask a question. And the question is regarding what are we looking for? Are we talking about a problem, or are we handling dilemmas? And to me, it's going to be a very crucial thing about my talk today if it is a problem for which we as scientists are trained to find the solution, or if it is a set of dilemmas for which no solutions ever exist. And I'll go back to that. My name is Marco Lucisano. Someone has allowed a paper maker to enter the room, and that's my background. I'm a paper physicist by training. And what I'm trying to do today is to show no science at all, but to deal with macroscopy. And macroscopy is the science of getting to some conclusions when you take away all of the details. So I'm going to talk about the frames that we are moving in. I am terribly interested in dilemmas. And if you want to reach me at some point, I live on LinkedIn, so please feel free to follow me. When you think about the future and look for solutions, very often you have a kind of dream that this is the pathway towards the future. And it would be nice, but it's not. To me, this is more the street, the road towards the future. And it is a rather interesting picture, because when you learn to drive a car in a fog, what you're learning to do is to react quickly enough to signals, to signs that you barely cannot see, and take conclusions. That's the entire exercise here. So to me, this is a very positive image for the future. And if you are skeptical about it, I would like to remind everyone that the future is the only thing we together can still influence. Nothing else can be influenced. So what we do at RISE, Research Institutes of Sweden, is within very many areas of science and technology. We are 3,000 people based in Sweden and Norway. Look at what is technically and scientifically possible today and towards the future, maybe 10, 15 years towards the future, and then try to see where we have meeting points or interesting intersections with global trends, and there trying to explore solutions or possibilities or opportunities for someone to develop. And then our input would be helping out of science and technology, developing. A couple of years ago, we did a very extensive survey of consumers, and we focused on the middle classes, urban middle classes in these 7 countries. And we asked hundreds of questions about materials, about all possible materials in all possible applications in life. And today I'm only going to give you a couple of results focusing on packaging materials, and in particular packaging material within the food sector. So the first question we might have, or we have asked, is how worried about environmental issues? And the green staples in the vertical direction are the people that are very worried or worried, and the gray ones are not worried at all. And the difference in between is essentially the indifferent responses. You see that there is a large variation between the 5 countries that I'm showing now. And I am an Italian, as our chairman said, living in Sweden. And when I show these images in Sweden, people are surprised that Sweden is so low. Since we are in the United States, would anyone like to guess what the answers were in the United States? High or low? High. Similar to Sweden, there are countries where you are higher up. If we continue, do you care about the environment? Same principle. The Swedes do not. Which is surprising, terribly surprising. What about the States? High or low? More than the Swedes, anyhow. There is one kind of consideration is very important behind these questions, and it is the fact that we are focusing on urban middle classes. If you live downtown Stockholm like I do, I never see the problem. If you live downtown a large city in Brazil or in China, you do see the problem. So this is the explanation that we can find while reading the data. If we continue, who is responsible for the environment? And here we plot trust in a group and responsibility that we ascribe to a group. And you see that there is one point that singles out, and it's you and me as individual people. We do believe that we are responsible, and we believe that we can trust in ourselves, which is an interesting thing. So now I've shown you the only graph I'm going to show you today. No more graphs. But we also asked, if you could do only one thing, one single thing that would have a great influence on the environment, what would it be? And the answer was, give us more efficient recycling systems. This is the very first answer in all countries. As you see, there is a difference, but it's the very first answer. People could choose between a lot of possibilities, and they could choose up to 3 possibilities. The interesting thing is that the second most frequent answer was force companies to recycle more. So this is my first point to you. There is a bias among urban middle classes in these 7 countries for recycling. And I mean nothing negative about describing it as a bias, but the first thing we think about is recycling. We should use it. But since we are possibly all very knowledgeable on how to handle waste, it is peculiar because we as consumers in these 7 countries jump to the third best option and do not even give a thought about the first 2. So waste prevention and preparing for reuse, they disappear from the mind of urban middle classes. So this is something that we should consider when moving forward. I've been asked to give some examples from Europe, and of course, since I live in Sweden, I have chosen to give examples from Sweden, but there is also another reason, and I'm going to get back to that later for me choosing Sweden. This is the increase of recycled materials in Sweden from the 70s, where the schemes for recycling that we have today were introduced up to now, or 2015. And you see that it has been a success. It's increasing, it's steadily increasing, and now we are up at very high levels. Actually, the latest statistics that are published by the organization that is in charge of making the system work give us fantastic collection rates. And you see, for newspapers that in Sweden are recycled together with packages, we are up to 95.5%. It's amazing. Plastic is low, but glass, paperboard, and metals are comparably high. So should we be happy? Should we say that Sweden is an example to be copied? If you just do it the Swedish way, we are going to work. Maybe, but there is one thing. Those numbers that I just showed you are about weight. So it's ton per ton. And that is important, but what about money? Dollar per dollar. What is the recycling rate as to money? And this is the reason why I chose Sweden. There is a very recent publication by a larger research project looking at that question. And this is the report behind the study. Regrettably, the complete study is only available in Swedish. There is only a summary in English. But what they do is that they estimate that 55 billion Swedish crowns per year is the value of materials reaching end of life every year. So if you divide by 10, more or less, you get in US dollars. And they estimate that first pass, after the first use, we are losing 76% of the value. 76% of the value lost, first pass. It's a catastrophe. I talked about paper making before, since I'm a paper maker, so we could have a look at that. And this is the examples for paper making. The original value, the red bar, lost volume, downcycling, and volume retained. So for paper making, in one of the most paper making intensive countries in the world, we lose 80% of the value. We collect 80% of the material, but we lose 80% of the value. Is that an example to follow, or is this a huge challenge towards the future? So how do we do it? This is the sorting station closest to my house in downtown Stockholm. Looks like this, and it has been looking like this since the 70s. Nothing has happened. And of course, that's the system altogether. This is in a cinema, in one of the largest cinema chains in Sweden. And it's very proper, as you see. You can divide all fractions. It's very Swedish organized. But this is the reality. Actually, there is a study done saying that 61 to 66% is the amount of garbage that we as Swedes sort the wrong way at home. So maybe this is not that surprising. So what are we missing here? I believe that it's very clear from this talk so far that if you look at value, we are missing opportunities. If you look at volume, maybe. There is one aspect that I would like to have you think about, and it's passing of time. I've said that the schemes used in Europe are being introduced in the 70s, in the middle of the 70s. What has happened since the 70s? And the answer is nothing. Nothing at all. We still sort the same way. We do it better, but not in a different way. So this is how it looks in Sweden, and this is how it would have looked if I could find a picture that is 30 years old. But I'm Italian. This is a picture that I've asked a friend of mine to take in Italy in a similar situation. Do you see the difference? No, I don't. So that's the way it might work. And the problem here is that we have been using the black hole approach. We have been using recycling as a way to dispose of waste, not as a way to handle the value of materials. So we need to do a shift, a mental shift, and then a practical shift. One thing that is discussed a lot today around the world is gamification. What if we could gamify handling materials? And there is actually one Swedish startup that has a system for gamification of materials. And their idea is that they want to connect the user, they want to connect us as people to trash and preventing it to become trash and be seen as material, as valuable material. And if we did that, could we actually make money or not? Or is it just a good fairy tale? This is downtown Stockholm again. This shopping mall is just in front of the most expensive shopping center or department store in Sweden. It's like being next door to Harrods in London. In this mall, the shops do not take deliveries to themselves. There is a material recycling company that collects everything that comes to the shopping mall. What they do is they open and unbox everything and deliver only the goods to the shops. Since they are a company specialized in materials, they manage to make money by handling recovered materials. And what's the trick here? It's that it's done by professionals at scale. So could we do that? Amazon is now delivering inside our homes. And if you live in Sweden, we go one step further. We are delivering inside our fridges. So if we do that, I see a couple of opportunities here. Why is it not possible for the company that does the delivery to take the packaging material back with them and do the sorting very early, thereby preventing loss of value? Or even better, a lot of the functionality of packaging is to protect the content, the goods, from you and I, from people, because we are clumsy. But if we have delivery all the way inside our fridges, can we then redesign packaging? And what would be the value of that? So as you might realize, I'm getting closer and closer to a circular economy, and the concept of the circular economy is about preserving value. So from a linear economy where you take, make, and dispose through a recycling-based economy that we might be today, at least Europe is at big steps moving towards the circular economy. So let's think about recycling here, and let's think about how it could work. Of course, we are introducing virgin materials in the systems. We have losses, and in Europe, where we don't do landfilling, we burn a lot, so it goes to energy. We import materials, and we export. Maybe not anymore. But if you go towards a circular economy instead, what happens now? Well, losses on energy, it's something that within the framework of a circular economy, you want to reduce as much as possible. So let's say, to make things easier, that we're going to remove those as well. And of course, you will have some spill out. But still, what we're trying to do is to accelerate the circle there. And now we have another big dilemma, because this is a major driving force, for example, in Brussels for the European Union. But there is another driving force at the same time. I understand that a lot of you are trained chemists to begin with, and then you know what happens if you introduce anything in that circle, and then you close the circle. It's going to stay inside the circle forever. So if we try to make very closed systems where we recover materials all the time, any kind of impurity that is introduced into the system will remain there forever. And that's a problem, because at the same time as Brussels is pushing Europe to go towards the circular economy, Brussels is also pushing Europe towards absolute purity for everything at detection levels. And then you might have this kind of problems coming up into the media, from mineral oils to BPA or the additives in 1/3 of fast food packaging. So this is another dilemma. We cannot do both things at the same time, or if we do both things at the same time, we have to find a compromise. And that's not the kind of compromise that political agreements are going to give us. It's about science, and it's about science for every individual situation. I'm claiming that since the questions are so complex and we are handling dilemma, then innovation by collaboration is the key to this. No one can solve it by themselves. And again, in Europe, this has been a big discussion, 2.5 billion of this in the UK per year. And just a couple of months thereafter, or maybe 1 year thereafter, in the city of London, you have seen this collaboration between institutions, companies, small and big, getting together to find new pathways towards the future. None of those are large scale or scaled enough to make any difference, but it's starting to move. And you know that there are other major players that are moving in the same field. Cities, I'm going to claim, are very important in this world. And the reason for that is the fact that cities are becoming more and more independent and more affirmative of what they intend to do. Let me give two examples, these two cities. What do they have in common, San Francisco and Stockholm? They are both beautiful and both on the water. Something more. They have the same size. The city, downtown San Francisco and downtown Stockholm have the same number of inhabitants. And the larger area around San Francisco and Stockholm have more or less the same number of inhabitants. What's the difference? San Francisco is composting, Stockholm is not. At all. So can you find one single solution that would work with those two realities? Possibly not. And now we have chosen two cities that are geographically very well separated, but I could have chosen cities that are closer enough. I think that this is a good picture, so that's why I chose those two cities. There is one other thing that cities are doing, and some cities are moving in a positive way. They're asking companies to give them something. For example, the city of Milan, when the Universal Exhibition was to be started 3 years ago, they said that within the perimeter of the Universal Exhibition, no single-use things were allowed that were not compostable. And they told exactly which standards had to be met. And of course, it happened. Or you have the city of New York banning styrofoam cups. I'm claiming that these two alternatives are generating the same type of reaction. They are reframing the ground on which we're moving. And by doing that, they are generating new solutions, new alternatives, new opportunities. Some of them are going to be very good. Some of them are going to be forgotten, hopefully soon. One of my earlier colleagues up on the stage today talked about confusion. And confusion is very dominant around materials and recycling, of course. Food to go is one big trend. And this is the leftovers after my favorite food to go meal in downtown Stockholm. And they come from the very same place. Who designed this? And who thought it was a good idea to have polylactic acid in the city of Stockholm where we do not have composting? How am I supposed to handle polylactic acid? So this is, again, I mentioned earlier, the lack of consumer-centric, people-centric approach and design thereof. And there are actually examples of companies that today already are realizing that focuses on consumer is one of the pathways towards a better set of solutions. And this is Costa. It's an article for 3 months ago. But also in France, you have students that have been protesting in the streets. You know that French people like to protest. And they were protesting in this particular opportunity, in this particular case, they were protesting about bad environmental choices by commercial companies. And now they're protesting about something else. Business activism is the last thing that I want to touch upon, and it's about the fact that some companies are moving faster than they are required to. And then, of course, you know that the business of business is business, so I really believe that no one is doing it for the good of society alone, but I see a business-related point to do that. One example would be Lush selling cosmetics, and this is in Milan, where Lush opened the first packaging-free shop. And when they say packaging-free, they don't actually mean it. They mean plastic-free, but still. And they're actually moving forward past that because a lot of Lush products are sold in black plastic jars. And you know that black is a tough color for recycling. So what does Lush do? Well, they recycle themselves. So they have a collection scheme to recover their black jars and to actually recycle by themselves their own black products because they believe that they still want to have it. And another alternative that is also very new related to black packaging, and this is for food, is Lidl, the supermarket chain, saying that they are going to remove black plastic from fruit and vegetables first, and then black plastic altogether 3-4 months from now. So these are companies that are moving faster than they have to, and by going that way, they are influencing how we move towards the future. So what I've tried to do in this 20 minutes that I had for my use was to give you actions, frames, thoughts that are framing how we should work with packaging and sustainability and recycling. And as a kind of summary, I would like to remind us that urban citizens appear to have a positive bias for recycling. We should use it. And we should be very confident in understanding that people, generally speaking, understand. We just have to give them means to use this positive bias. New technologies and new opportunities. And here I'm talking a lot about the interaction between the digital world and the physical world. So let's try to interact with the materials that we very often classify only as wastes. Recycling, when we talk about it, should we say ton per ton or dollar per dollar? or both. Consumer behavior, I believe, is going to be one key driver, and it is being developed today. The circular economy gives us a dilemma, material value or absolute purity. And I believe that it's up to us as scientists to handle that dilemma. Business activism is one way to develop pathways towards the future. And at last, I really believe that we shouldn't look for the solution. There is not a single solution. Handling sustainability and recycling of packaging is about handling dilemmas, and it's a very fascinating thing to do. And with that, I would like to thank you for your attention.